What's going on? This is Kareem from DJBooth.net, and I'm here in the lab to give you guys a full review of the brand new Native Instruments Maschine Mk3. So if you guys remember, about 3 years ago on this very channel, we reviewed the Maschine Studio, which at the time was the most powerful and biggest and baddest machine controller that you guys could get in order to make beats with. And now we have the brand new Maschine Mk3, which is a little bit smaller, a nice compact form factor, and it has mostly all of the features that were included with the Maschine Studio, and it adds a lot more features to make this machine even better than the last. So right off the bat, one of the biggest inclusions in this bad boy is the sound card. Lots of inputs and output options that we have built right into the machine. We still have those dual color screens here, but again, we have that nice small form factor overall, and we have a machine jam here, right here behind me. So you can see that this is basically almost the same footprint as the machine jam, but it has lots and lots of power, lots more functionality within it. So right off the bat, it has bigger pads, bigger RGB pads, and they're actually more sensitive than the other machine pads as well. We'll show you guys that in the demo. It still has these touch sensitive knobs. It has a really cool layout now. All of these black buttons here, when you plug this bad boy in, you'll be able to see all of the lit up functions that all of these black buttons portray. And when you actually see it all in motion and in action, you realize that the layout is meant for you to easily create new music on the fly. And it has a nice small footprint, so that way it can fit into many different DJ spaces or many different studios that are small and compact as well. The nice construction all around on the Maschine Mk3 is due to a nice heavy weight to it. It has mostly all hard plastic feel to it, to the top and to the sides. However, the bottom is a full metal plate. Usually the old machine had a front face that was a metal plate, but this machine has a metal back plate, and it just feels really, really sturdy, really solid. It has a angle to it, so that way you always get to see the screens because it has a nice gradient angle to it. But I do wish that it had feet on it, so that way it can match the height of other gear, such as the complete control keyboards, because we use this alongside the keyboards. But as it sits, it just sits a little bit lower than the keyboard. So I wish that they came out with some type of extension or some type of stands that we can use this on, so that way we can bring it up to other keyboard height. Other than that, the construction is very, very solid, and there's lots of updates, so a lot to get into. So we're going to take this over to the bench and show you everything inside the brand new Maschine Mk3. All right, so right off the bat, we're going to take a look at all of the inputs and outputs. This is the most exciting section of the brand new machine because it finally has an internal sound card built right in, and your volume controls are right here on the back as well. You have your headphone volume knob all the way to the left, then you have your headphone output jack, then you have your line output volume knob, and then two TRS balanced line outputs. You have your microphone gain knob and your microphone input. You also have dual TRS line inputs as well, a MIDI in, a MIDI out, and you also have your pedal as well. Next up is your USB, and then you have your power and your on-off switch. This is completely USB powered, and it's very, very bright with USB power only. You only need the power when you're in super low light conditions, but then again, I still can see just fine in low light condition using this with only the USB jack. Alright, so here it is. This is the Maschine Mk3. And right at the top you see we have these gorgeous dual high resolution screens, and you can use these screens to monitor things such as waveforms. You can also look at your mixers. You can also monitor your sampling from your inputs on the back or through your actual program. You also have a browser mode, so that way you can browse and go between all of your different sounds and tracks that you guys have here. And you can also use this big oversized browse encoder to go backwards, forwards, and to jump around both of the double screens. You can go up and down with it, and you can also press the button in order to load the different sound that you would like to. You also have these buttons here that allow you to change the different screens that you guys see here at the bottom of the screens, and this actually shows you the different decay, attack, all the different parameters of the current plugin in which you're using. Next up, you have a file save button, auto button, macro set button, and a settings button as well, so you can choose between your different metronome settings, your record settings, so on and so forth. The buttons at the top will correspond to the different menus that you have on screen, and then you have these touch sensitive buttons at the bottom that allow you to change the different parameters of all of your different sounds that you guys have loaded into Maschine. You also have your 16 velocity sensitive RGB backlit pads. These are the best pads of any Maschine to date. They feel the best. They're very, very responsive. They are more responsive to velocity than the originals, and they also are bigger pads than the originals or any of the other machines in the lineup. Really, really sensitive velocity. If you press it softly, you're going to get a really soft hit, and when you mash on it, you're going to get loud volume. And you can use these parameter knobs here to change the different parameters of the sound that you're using. Next up, you have your different navigation buttons that are for your DAW or within your Maschine software. You have a scene button, so that way you can see all the different scenes that you have that make up your track. You also have a pattern button, so you can break down individual patterns that make up the scenes. And you also have an events view, so that way you can see a big long event of that particular sound that you're working with. Variation, so that way you can variate your different sounds, your velocities, and that way it sounds more human than just being a machine type sound. Duplicate, so that way you can duplicate your different groups or your different sounds. Select, solo, and mute are also here as well. Then to control more of your DAW or to control your tracks within your Maschine software, you can play, pause here. You can record to count in. You can stop. You can have a shift button here, so that way you have different features and functions for your different buttons. You have your restart loop. You also have your erase, replace, tap, metronome, and follow grid as well. All of these will be familiar to anyone who's using DAWs in the past or the Maschine software. Here up you have your groups. You have 8 groups present at one time, but there are infinite number of groups within Maschine, so you can make as many groups as you need or as you see fit in order to create your track. Next up, you actually have a really cool section here that will allow you to play in different ways. You have your note repeat button here, or ARP button. As you can see, it's bigger than all of the buttons around it, so that way when you're performing, it's really easy to do a note repeat, and you can change the rate of your note repeat. You also have a lock button. This is really new and it's really awesome because this way you can lock your current settings of the sound or the playback that you have, and then you can go crazy with all your different parameters and really experiment. And then when you're finished experimenting or you don't like what you actually did, you can hit that exit lock button and it will bring you back to whatever you locked up. Next up, you have your touch strip here. Your touch strip can act as a pitch wheel, as a mod wheel. It can also act as a touch effect, or it can act as a notes parameter. So when you have this bad boy in the notes performance section, you'll be able to play your corresponding notes through the touch strip. When you have this on perform mode, again, you'll be able to enact the different effects that you have selected at the time using the touch strip. And when you have a pitch mode, you can change the pitch of the pad. Then you have your mod wheel as well. Really cool to have this included here on this actual machine instead of having to have a keyboard in order to change things like pitch and mod and to actually strum your notes. Next up, you have your different pad mode sections. You have normal pad mode. You can also change this to from fixed velocity to sensitive. You have your keyboard mode, which allows you to change this all now to keys. Then you have your chords mode as well. And then you have your step sequencer, so that way you can change the different step patterns that you guys have available. So in conclusion, the new Maschine Mk3 is definitely a step up and an upgrade for anyone using the original Maschine or the Maschine Mk2 or one of the micros that are also out. And it is also a step up from the Maschine Studio. If you guys were working with the original Maschines, Mk1, Mk2, I definitely think this update is worth it. If you're using a Maschine Studio, this update may not be worth it to you, but it's definitely worthy of a look because it has a nice compact overall footprint, great build quality, built-in sound card, it has bigger, more responsive pad, and it still has those high resolution color screens so that way you can do things like navigating between your sounds, your tracks, your patterns, your scenes, and doing a lot of different editing on the fly just using the screens on the Maschine Mk3 without actually looking at the monitor of your computer. The Maschine Mk3 is also fully USB powered. The only time you would need to use the actual power cord for this is when you're in a really low light situation, but even during low light situations, I was able to see everything just fine off of just pure USB power. On the downside, there is no additional feet or any extensions to make this thing higher or change the angle as it stands right now. So you're stuck at the angle that it's at, which is also a good angle because you can see the screens nice and precisely. But if you're using this with other gear that is higher than it or taller, then you might want to extend this some type of way in order to bring it up to the same height as we had to do with the complete control as well. And the other minor gripe with this unit is that it is not yet completely standalone. You still need to plug this into the computer, but with the inclusion of the sound card and the screens, it's just hollering or screaming out to be a standalone unit, but that is not yet possible. Perhaps in the Mk4 edition, we'll be able to see this bad boy as both a on-the-go machine with no laptop or a machine that you can just plug into your computer. So for more on the review summary, you guys can head on over to www.djbooth.net/DJS, or you guys can click on the link at the top of this video description. Make sure you guys hit the thumbs up if you like this video, and make sure you guys subscribe so that way you know when new videos like this are coming out. And as always, thanks for watching.